Having just woken up from her fainting spell, Dasha was in a state of shock. Her body was hanging helplessly over a sheer cliff hundreds of meters high. One wrong move and her body would slide against the sharp rocks and be swept away by the raging river current below. Even crazier, her husband was dangling right below her feet. Without a parachute of his own, the man's life was held up only by a rope that could snap at any moment. The agony intensified when her husband's glasses disappeared. Due to his severe nearsightedness, his vision was blurry. He couldn't even tell how high his feet were above death. In the midst of this life and death situation, only the howling of the strong wind could be heard, as if to further emphasize that death was just around the corner. Just as Dasha was about to bend down to check on her husband, the pilot immediately held her back. After all, even a slight jolt could sever their lifeline. Worse still, this harness wasn't a professional safety harness at all. It was just a piece of ordinary parachute cord that was already stretched beyond its capacity to support their weight. What's even scarier is that their rope only got caught on a slender tree branch. One wrong move and the branch would break, sending all three of them hurtling into the abyss. What was even more unexpected was that the husband's actions actually made the situation even more dangerous. After further investigation, it turns out that the pilot involved with them is Dasha's ex-boyfriend, who they haven't seen for years. What should have been a beautiful honeymoon moment turned into the most terrifying nightmare. So, was this a pure tragic accident? Or a man-made disaster that was deliberately created? Today we're going to discuss the latest Russian survival thriller film from 2026 entitled The Abyss. All this chaos actually started a few days before. This newlywed couple is excited to plan their dream honeymoon. Initially, Dasha thought their holiday destination was the Maldives. But when she arrived at the airport, Dasha was shocked to find out that her husband had suddenly changed plans unilaterally. It turns out Sasha secretly changed their vacation destination to her past dream destination. Sasha knew from Dasha's post that this mountain location was the dream place she most wanted to visit. Unfortunately, that place holds Dasha's old dream that she once planned with her old love. So, Sasha was determined to change their holiday destination to the Caucasus Mountains, exactly like the photo Dasha had uploaded. Sasha felt proud because he thought he had given the sweetest surprise to his wife. Without Sasha realizing it, the sweet memories in the photo were actually created by Dasha with her ex-lover. Seeing her husband's eyes so full of hope, Dasha couldn't bear to ruin the atmosphere. Dasha also chose to keep the bitter reality hidden. But they never expected that this change of plans would be the beginning of a terrible disaster. It didn't take long, they finally arrived at their destination. But as soon as they arrived, local officials immediately warned them that there was a major forest fire nearby. The emergency team has even issued a flight ban and canceled all tourist attractions there. In that instant, all the beautiful vacation plans that Sasha had prepared were ruined. However, just as the two were about to leave, suddenly a very familiar voice sounded from behind. Dasha, who had turned around, was immediately stunned. It turns out, the pilot standing in front of her was none other than her ex-boyfriend, who she had lost contact with for years. Apparently, the ex was there for work as a skydiving guide for tourists. While trying to stay calm, Dasha forced herself to calm down the awkwardness and introduce the two of them to each other.
Артём, мой старый знакомый, это Саша, мой муж.
Привет. Hearing that Dasha was married, Alexei was silent for a long time before finally forcing himself to congratulate them. The awkward atmosphere made Dasha reluctant to stay any longer. After exchanging some casual pleasantries, she quickly pulled Sasha away. Dasha thought the awkward reunion was over, but Sasha, who knew nothing about their background, refused to leave disappointed. Without hesitation, Sasha instead told Dasha to use her acquaintance to save their vacation plans. Sasha hopes Alexei will make an exception and take them on a flight just once. Dasha, who had just managed to hide the truth, was now at a loss for an excuse to refuse her husband's request. In the end, Dasha was forced to give in and return due to her husband's persistent persuasion. Meanwhile, Alexei, who was actually feeling uneasy, only hesitated for a moment before finally agreeing to their request. Before long, the three of them were in the air, flying in a small, old-looking plane. However, the couple who were mesmerized by the beautiful scenery below had no idea that Alexei was flying the plane without official permission. A moment later, a flock of birds appeared to be soaring across their flight path. Suddenly, disaster struck. Their plane collided violently with a flock of birds in midair. The propeller shattered instantly. Thick black smoke billowed out, obscuring the view from the windows. Following a few muffled bangs, the plane's engine suddenly died completely. Out of control, the plane immediately dived rapidly down towards the valley floor. No matter how hard Alexei tried to control the steering wheel, it was completely useless. Seeing the increasingly critical situation, he immediately rushed to the rear cabin to look for a parachute. The situation becomes even more dire because Dasha and Sasha are completely unfamiliar with how to use a parachute. Alexei quickly put the parachute on Sasha while giving quick instructions on how to open the parachute. Alexei immediately told Dasha the dire news. The plane only had 2 parachutes, so 2 people had to jump in pairs using one piece of equipment. There was no time to explain. Alexei quickly locked the chest belt and thigh straps, pressing Dasha's body tightly against his. Without hesitation, he threw the trembling Sasha out of the plane door. Instantly, he jumped across the hatch carrying Dasha in his tight embrace. The rudderless plane flew past them, before finally hitting the ground in the distance and leaving a thick cloud of smoke. Slammed by the strong air turbulence, Sasha panicked and immediately pulled hard on the parachute expansion ring on his chest. Meanwhile, Alexei steadied himself in the air and rushed to open his parachute, instantly stopping the terrifying free fall. But the crisis wasn't over. Although Sasha managed to open his parachute, he had no idea how to control his flight. While gliding down, Sasha's uncontrolled parachute actually flew closer to Alexei and Dasha. Despite trying his best to control the direction, Sasha still ended up hitting Alexei and Dasha's parachute. Instantly, the ropes of the 2 parachutes became tangled together in the air. Instantly, the parachute that had lost its wind wrapped them up and they hurtled down. The wild parachute floated erratically, constantly swaying in the air following the direction of the wind. Luckily, the parachute fabric above was not destroyed by the impact. Luckily, the parachute brought the 3 of them to a smooth landing in a yard. Sasha, who landed first, immediately got up quickly, trying to pull his wife away from danger. But just then, a strong wind suddenly blew. The parachute, which had been drooping uselessly, suddenly inflated again. Alexei screamed in panic, telling Sasha to pull the parachute cords. However, the tangled cords left Sasha confused, unsure which one to pull. In an instant, the strong winds dragged the 3 of them like helpless strands, sliding rapidly down the slippery slope straight towards the edge of the cliff. This is the terrifying scene Dasha saw when she first woke up in the opening of the video. Luckily, they didn't fall straight to the bottom of the ravine. Their parachutes caught on a tree branch jutting out from the edge of the cliff, leaving them dangling helplessly in the air. Sasha was hanging at the very bottom beneath the 2 of them, suspended helplessly in the air, and his life was literally on the line. But no matter what happens above, if anyone gets loose, they'll be the first to fall. In this extremely critical situation, the 3 of them did not dare to make the slightest big movement. Dasha and Sasha, who could still move their arms, slowly took out their phones to call for help. Unfortunately, there was no signal in the valley. Seeing this, Alexei rushed to tell them that he had brought a walkie-talkie. But unfortunately, the walkie-talkie was badly damaged due to the impact. What's worse, the flight they took was illegal from the start. The ground team had no idea where their flight route was, so even if they were reported missing, rescue teams would have a very hard time finding the location of this remote cliff quickly. Dasha groaned in resignation. Their situation was truly deadlocked and there was no way out.
Эй! Я вас не похищал, ты сама ко мне подошла там на поле.
Ты должен был честно сказать, что не сможешь, но тебе же надо выпендриться, блин, вечно ты.
Полегчало?
But as soon as she realized the reality, she immediately fell silent. Meanwhile, Sasha didn't hear any strange sounds around them. An idea struck him. Armed with childhood memories of taking apart radios with his grandfather, he thought he might be able to fix the walkie-talkie. The problem is, how do you hand the tool to him in this dangling position? Don't tremble. One small mistake and the device will fall and be lost. Everything has to go perfectly. There can't be the slightest mistake. After mustering up the courage, Sasha immediately took off a bunch of keys and freed half of his body from the seatbelt.
Go! И... Раз, два...
3.
Finally, the item managed to change hands safely without the slightest harm. Sasha then reached into his pocket to take out the key, then very carefully turned and removed the screw on the outer cover of the device. Despite his numb fingers, he reconnected the disconnected circuit board wires. The walkie-talkie finally turned back on. But no matter how hard he tried to call out, only a hiss of static greeted him. 40 minutes passed in vain. Their calls for help still went unanswered. The real threat of death began to creep in, while their position was still hanging critically in the air. The tight straps of the harness continued to squeeze the veins in their thighs, slowly paralyzing blood flow. Numbness began to spread through their hands and feet. The threat of fainting was just around the corner. The danger of orthostatic shock is increasingly real, which can trigger cardiac arrest at any time. Alexei estimated they could only hold out for another hour at most. This situation must be changed immediately before death truly takes them. And the only way left is for someone to climb the tree trunk to release the rope that is hanging them. However, because her body was wrapped in thick, loose clothing, her movements were very limited. Sasha, not wanting his wife to take any risks, immediately took action upon hearing this. Sasha pulled tightly on the parachute cord and tried to climb to the top. Even though he hadn't climbed in a long time, the parachute at the top remained his only major support. Alexei rushed to grab him while shouting loudly, asking the person to stop moving immediately. There was no other choice. Sasha could only use it to slowly pull himself back to his starting position.
Не дергайся!
Only Dasha could move now. She took a deep breath and prepared to take control of the situation. She slowly freed herself from the restraints of the harness. With Alexei's help, Dasha began to struggle to climb up. Every movement made the rope vibrate violently. Her palms kept slipping down, but luckily Dasha was still able to endure the pain. With sheer willpower, she climbed to the top. Despite her immense fatigue, her hands managed to reach the tree trunk. However, just when the three of them thought the hardest part was over, Dasha gasped. A snake was just beyond her reach, and now it was slowly creeping closer. Stuck in the air, she didn't dare make a move. Dasha could only slowly break branches, desperately trying to dislodge the snake. But in the next second, the unexpected happened. Luckily, Sasha's quick grip saved her at the last second. But the sudden load caused the fragile parachute to slip and sag again. As soon as he was freed from the shackles, he immediately pulled his body into the parachute. Dasha was now being helped to pull the rope, but Sasha knew the threat of death wasn't completely over. His wife, who was still gripped by fear, tried to climb up, but Sasha reflexively held her back. Then he let all his weight rest on his shoulders, as he struggled as hard as he could to push Dasha up. At the same time, the two men gritted their teeth and fought with all their might. Finally, the threat of the crisis was temporarily overcome. After hearing the reasons for her failure, Alexei didn't complain one bit. Instead, without hesitation, he immediately used his mouth to suck out the blood from the wound. Then he asked Dasha to immediately restrain and tie her wrists tightly. This method can temporarily stop the spread of poison throughout the body, a very careful and prompt step indeed. However, that brief moment seemed to bring them back to the time when they first fell in love. At that time, he still considered danger as the thing that made him feel truly alive. As long as there's an extreme, adrenaline-pumping activity, she and Alexei are always there. But in reality, Dasha has absolutely no interest in such things. She even harbored fears. All of this was done just to please a man who loves parkour. Who would have thought the decision to climb the abandoned building would end up being their final adventure? The hard work paid off. They finally made it to the roof. However, just as she was getting ready to take my usual video recording, unexpectedly Alexei took out a small box from his pocket. Dasha thinks her dream has come true, her lover has changed and is ready to build a life with her. But once the box was opened, her hopes were dashed. It wasn't a ring, but a penguin toy. Apparently, Alexei is planning his next crazy adventure to Antarctica and innocently asked Dasha to come with him. According to him, the crazy idea actually felt so romantic. Without realizing it, Dasha was actually very disappointed, even though the woman still forced a smile. Polar exploration might be cool, but all Dasha really wants is a real ring. Alexei certainly caught the implied meaning behind those words and forced smile. But in order to achieve his goal, he dared to jump and landed right on the iron frame in front of him. Alexei hopes that this crazy action will make his girlfriend melt and accept his invitation. Forced by circumstances, Dasha could only quickly agree to his wishes. Alexei promises this will be his last crazy act, but just as he's getting ready to leave, Alexei's injuries were indeed very serious, but fortunately, his life was no longer in danger. Even as he lay weak in the hospital, he kept smiling, confident that once he recovered even a little, the expedition to Antarctica could still go ahead. But this time, Dasha was really traumatized and scared. Dasha urged her lover to promise that he would never again take dangerous risks in the future. But for Alexei, giving up his adventures was like being forced to die. He felt completely constrained and uncomfortable. Failing to keep that promise, Dasha finally realized the two of them would never be the same. Their love story is officially over. In order to vent her heartache after breaking up, Dasha immediately got drunk at the company's annual party. Not only did she jump on the table, she even accidentally fell and fainted on the floor. Just when everyone was busy making a spectacle of her, Sasha stepped forward and helped her up. Not feeling disgusted at all, Sasha instead patiently stayed by her side while she vomited. Without asking why she was crying, Sasha sincerely offered her help. A sincere tenderness without the slightest reservation. Slowly, Dasha managed to rise from her slump until finally their relationship grew closer. In the end, Dasha was sure that the man in front of her was the ideal husband she had been looking for. Worried that this newly started spark of love will just disappear, the voices of the people below could be heard continuously calling out to each other, trying to catch her attention. Unable to hold back the guilt any longer, she finally stopped hiding and revealed their entire past. She was forced to hide the truth at the start just to ensure her husband's honeymoon plans remained perfect.
Да, идеально не придумаешь.
In the midst of the frozen relationship between the three of them, the signal from the walkie-talkie suddenly responded, breaking the silence. Seeing this, Sasha rushed to call for help. Unfortunately, he couldn't tell them their exact location. He could only use the winding river below them as a guide. Unfortunately, the rescue team said the canyon stretched for more than 10 kilometers. To make matters worse, the majority of rescue teams are busy extinguishing forest fires. Even if we set off now, finding their position quickly would be nearly impossible.
Нас найдут?
90 minutes have passed since the tragedy occurred. After enduring for so long, some of them began to feel their limbs slowly going numb. In that terrifying moment, blood suddenly dripped right onto Sasha's face. Seeing this, he immediately asked. Dasha, who immediately examined it carefully, finally realized where the drops of blood had come from. It turns out Alexei was already seriously injured before he fell and landed on the cliff. His genitals continued to be strangled without any blood flow at all until his condition turned extremely pale. In order to lighten the load, Sasha dared to swing his body to reach the rock cliff.
Саш!
Да я тут вижу! Подступ какой-то, сейчас я пробую зацепиться, хоть веревки ослаблю.
Идея супер, Сань! Только аккуратно, ладно? Вот прямо сейчас не очень хотелось бы умереть.
Luckily, after several tries, Sasha finally managed to reach the rock outcropping. Unfortunately, just as he was about to use all his strength to hold on, his feet slipped and his body was thrown back. His body slammed hard back against the rock wall until the strong shock of the swing pulled his parachute cord out even more. Instantly, the parachute hanging from the tree immediately fell down. As the load and pressure increases, the tree they are caught in becomes more and more bent. The parachute continues to plummet towards the treetops. Hearing the branches creak and the wind blow harder, Alexei knew they had to lighten the load fast. Otherwise, in an instant, they would all fall to the bottom of the abyss. Alexei's eyes fell on Sasha's parachute bag. There was still a spare parachute in there. The trigger cord is located right on the right side of the parachute. He could cut the rope and jump into the valley. The problem was, the cliff was only 300 meters from the bottom. If the rope is cut, the delay until hitting the ground is very short. Sasha only has a maximum of 6 seconds to act. As soon as she heard it, Dasha immediately moved quickly without hesitation. Without caring about the danger, Sasha began cutting the rope until in an instant, only one strand of rope was left to support the entire weight. Dasha screamed hysterically, asking her husband to stop immediately.
Я когда-нибудь подводил? Все будет путем.
Without hesitation, Sasha immediately cut the last rope and let his wife survive in the midst of an emergency situation. The parachute successfully inflated, but the wind immediately hit his body with full force. Dasha could only watch the parachute inflate just before landing. Instantly, his body crashed to the ground, motionless. From a distance, she couldn't tell if her husband was still safe. Alexei kept trying to calm Dasha down, assuring her that help would come and Sasha would be safe. Their main task at this time is only one: to survive until the moment of rescue arrives. Hearing that, Dasha could only suppress her hopes and focus on surviving. 8 ropes held their parachute domes in place, allowing them to float slowly through the air. They continued to wait in silence, but after 180 minutes had passed, there was still no movement. The prolonged stagnation of blood circulation began to take its toll on Alexei's body. He even fainted and lost consciousness several times. Trembling in despair, Dasha continued to struggle to call out to Alexei to keep him conscious. Alexei knew exactly his time was running out. As an ex-lover, Alexei uses his remaining energy to apologize for their previous breakup, which made him lose Dasha. It was only then that he realized how valuable Dasha was in his life. He then told Dasha that they actually still had a spare parachute stored in their bag. A height of 300 meters is too risky. If they jumped together, they would definitely hit the ground before their parachutes could open. Because her body is lighter, only Dasha has a chance to survive.
Затянешь все крепления, дернешь за кольцо отцепки. Основной парашют отцепится. И сразу же после этого дергаешь кольцо запаски. У тебя будет меньше 6 секунд, поняла?
Seeing Alexei trying to get out of the parachute rope, Dasha, who understood his sacrificial intentions, immediately hugged the man tightly. With sobs, Dasha shouted that she would never leave Alexei. But with Alexei's body completely numb, Dasha was powerless to support his weight. How many of you are getting irritated seeing this tight moment? Dasha was alone now, but she had no time to grieve. Her focus was only one: landing safely. The retaining branch is starting to give way. Dasha must quickly follow Alexei's instructions to activate the reserve parachute. After checking all the safety buckles on her body, Dasha pulled hard on the main parachute release ring. Her body suddenly went into free fall. Dasha hurriedly pulled the reserve parachute lever before it was too late. But the distance was too close. The parachute had only just opened when her body slammed hard into the water. Luckily, her life was saved. Dragging her injured leg, Dasha continued to struggle to get up and walk along the river in order to continue her hope of survival. Suddenly, she saw a piece of parachute fabric caught in a tree. Without hesitation, Dasha immediately limped over to it. Sure enough, Dasha saw her husband Sasha, lying on the ground. Although unconscious, he was still breathing weakly. Successfully opening the parachute in just 6 seconds for the first time, that was what really saved his life. And that's how this incredible tale of risking one's life ends. Until the end of the story, Dasha still leaves her choice between the two men a puzzle. Behind the fierce winds of the cliff, right beneath her feet, was a bottomless abyss. The chasm actually represents the rift between the two chapters of Dasha's life. Sasha is the figure who brings calm, healing her shattered soul and giving her a new life, while Alexei is the most passionate trail in her youth. One accompanies her in weaving the future, and the other saves her life at the risk of her own life. Long before he was thrown off the cliff, Sasha apparently already knew the secret his wife had been keeping all this time. Even so, he still dared to cut the rope to reduce the burden so that his wife would have a chance to survive. Alexei was fully aware that Dasha now belonged to another man. Despite this, he was still willing to risk his life to give her a glimmer of hope for survival. Without demanding Dasha to choose, the two men said their final goodbyes in their own way, because true love doesn't always have to have, and not all stories have to continue until the end. But when faced with death, all they want is for the woman to still have a future, even if they themselves no longer have the chance to live it. I'm Cinemind Recaps taking my leave. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the bell for updates on the latest films. Amigos.